to Numbers Therapy, episode 14, Team Dynamics and U.S. Road Trips. Look, ETH is roaring past 1700 now, and for the time we have some action, so really excited to have this conversation today for all markets, not just bull or bear or pump fake markets or otherwise. This is going to be relevant to everything. So a couple initial announcements worth calling out first. So first off, just want to say a special thank you to the MVHQ team, specifically Poop, Mitch, Top Hat, EQ, for helping us move this to another level. So Numbers Therapy is headed for the big time. You'll see over time our audio will be improved. Plus, you'll start to see this shared across several channels, including Spotify and others as well. My request, unfortunately, for T-Pain-like voice modulation was denied. However, you will certainly notice better quality sound and other elements moving forward. We're now moving to also recommendation and application only format. And so we need your help in making Numbers Therapy and an MBHQ product even better. So you'll see on the announcement for today and throughout the week a link to a form. So please, for yourself, or if you have a recommendation, please take the 2 minutes to fill out the form. We're looking to just have the best quality people on here for this MBHQ podcast. And so any suggestions really mean a lot to us. On to today's episode. And so if you've seen our past few episodes, we've been traveling a lot and going international to ensure we can see the major differences and nuance across cultures. Today's is similar, though a bit different, as we'll be doing a bit of a US-centric road trip, where we'll be talking about any differences observed across regions of the US, which will probably make for a pretty fun audience chime in as well, as everyone's from everywhere across the US and elsewhere. And we'll be hitting on a ton of value from the functional side as well on dissecting teams, and more on that soon. So just in general, the purpose of Numbers Therapy is to talk through the macro stuff and bring on and showcase our experts in here. And more specifically, so that everyone can understand how all of the big pieces fit together, make better decisions with NFTs and other investments using a balanced perspective, learn about or from some of our people in here and get different perspectives. And then lastly, learn about different areas and opportunities that exist out there as well, and just different ways of thinking. So I also say as a reminder, for every conversation that we have for the live audience, there's always different levels that exist in here, regardless of the topic that we have. And so if you're a bit newer on a topic and you have a question, if it's about the definition of a word or an acronym, please just send it across during the show. It's really important that we make sure everybody's along for the full ride. Somebody else probably has the exact same question, so please, feel free to say something in the chat, and we'll make sure your question gets answered so you fully understand and are on the same page. And then lastly, important note and disclaimer: none of what you hear in here is financial advice. It is all opinions. And so, without further ado, today we got a very special dude on. In addition to just being a good dude, he's an internal fan. And with a lot of that coming from just how he operates, he's had a pretty good journey in Web3, part of which I'm going to even learn with you all in here today. And just does an amazing job in connecting with communities, setting a good tone, and being thoughtful in addition to a variety of other things. Through his journey in Web3, he's become very discerning, able to easily pick apart projects very rapidly. A large portion of this is teams, where he's certainly seen a lot of them, and I'm candidly excited to talk through this today, as I've spent a lot of time myself with a variety of startup teams. So it'll be fun to contrast a little bit for Web3 and look forward to what he sees. He's also a loyal Mavs fan, which may require some patience on his side, and a pretty excellent event organizer as well. He's also become a good friend and someone I always appreciate seeing at NFT events. So without further ado, please welcome Jacob. Jacob, how is it going today?
Aslo, thanks for having me, man. That was a beautiful intro from the jazz to your kind words. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, a bit longer intro than normal. So thanks for the audience and everybody for for staying in tune and listening to that. But a lot of exciting things happening, and you being on is certainly one of those, man. So let's start with background first. So as we tend to do. So before Web3, before all this started happening, how were you spending your time? Like, what was your background? Whatever you feel comfortable sharing there.
Yeah, so Um, I graduated with a business degree from the University of Michigan, and I quickly went into the corporate life of hell. I don't think I've ever had a 9 to 5 job that I've liked. And yeah, I started off with like more traditional sales and marketing. I interned at Unilever for a bit, but it just wasn't that exciting to sell like lotion. And then I did a sales job, sales and recruiting at um, sort of like tech recruiting firm, and that was just horrible. And then I went into a sort of like product management role at a health tech startup, and then I found my way into Web3 one way or another.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like I can see now the pieces coming together in terms of how you think and the way you think, and why you're good at many of the things that you're good at as well. It makes a whole lot of sense now as well. So after that happened, before you made your way into Web3, or when it was starting off, how did that come about originally? Like, were you a Top Shot person? Like, what was the genesis of Web3 for you? And then also, like, what were your initial takes? How did you think that it was going to fit into your time and focus? Were you instantly intrigued? Was it skepticism originally, and then it took time? Like, talk to me about that background.
Yeah, so I would say getting into Web3 really just I'd followed, blockchain crypto for a number of years, but I'd always just been too broke to really invest my money or time just into it. And since I didn't have any money in it, I didn't like look super deep. I was just kind of like, oh yeah, blockchain. Oh yeah, Bitcoin. It's just the new tech or the new scam everyone's on. And I mean, I've always been just a huge nerd and super interested in just innovation and technology. So I think that I had that kind of natural inclination. And once I, I guess to go a little bit deeper into it, when I really found Web3 was kind of like my rock bottom, honestly. I had like just broken up with my long-term girlfriend in Michigan. I had just moved back into my parents' house, and I was really just looking, I was just kind of reevaluating my life in terms of what I wanted to do, what I was passionate about, what I was good at. And um, everything was kind of just pointing towards Web3, or I didn't really know what Web3 was at the time. I had just started doing Top Shot. I went on like a ski trip with my friends, and they were all doing it. Um, they're like super huge sports fans, and like we ran this sports analytics club back in college together. So it was just kind of natural fit to go into Top Shot. And I kind of just started super casually there. Then I got like really addicted to Twitter, and once I kind of knew that Web3 was where I wanted to be, um, I was looking for more traditional jobs in Web3. So I was kind of trying to like halfway go into it, which didn't really work. I can kind of go into that later, but I I was basically just trying to learn as much as I could about marketing and social media in Web3, so I could do that for, a more traditional company that's looking to do that. I wanted to work for a company called Alchemy really badly because my friend had a good connection with their team and was kind of helping me integrate into go through some of the recruitment process, but they were just super hard to make it into. And I basically was just doing anything I can to learn there. And that's what actually led me to buy my board ape was, I'm seeing all this ape follow ape on Twitter, and it seemed like, I had to figure out how this was working, what was going on, how I can grow my following. And yeah, everything kind of just snowballed from there.
Super interesting. Super interesting. Now, just small point here. Did you buy your board ape? Did you meet your board ape? How did that process go? I'm just curious.
Oh no, I wish I minted. I bought it a little over a year from now. I bought it on Memorial Day. I remember it was a long weekend, and it was 0.99 ETH, I think, and the floor price was around zero point 0.7 when I did buy it. So it's not a floor ape. No one can ever say that. But
I think that's even more impressive, man, because like and if you mint originally, like you'd see something coming, you'd see the wave coming to some extent. You're taking a shot at low cost. That is what it is, right? But at that point, there weren't these like home runs yet that happened, right? Other than maybe Top Shot, but not in like ETH land at least. So to actually buy that from secondary already at a multiple and do that, it's pretty impressive. So it's very very cool. So
yeah, I would say it's more sheer dumb luck that I mean I didn't know it went up or down or what the price was when it started or we barely even had any tools, right, to
yeah,
look at it. But yeah, it was definitely a a risky trade at the time.
fair enough. Fair enough. At the very least, you saw something you liked. You saw a pattern you liked of people following and something bubbling up to some extent. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the past year, but maybe we'll put like a little bit of an interesting spin on it to some extent. So I sometimes ask that question to people who come on. I say, "What have you seen in the past year? What trends?" That kind of a thing. So I'd love to hear that, but I'd also love to hear more specifically on the team side of things what you've seen since you spend so much time and attention speaking with different teams, meeting with different teams, see who's good, who's bad, otherwise. What has that looked like for you for the past year in terms of projects and also teams? How has that evolved? Curious to hear what your perspective is.
Yeah, it's a really good question because being on all these different partner calls or we have so many different conversations just because of MVHQ that you meet a lot of different people. You'll meet people, who have that Web 2 background or are just, 13 years old diving into Web 3. So you really meet a wide range of people. And yeah, you can kind of quickly tell at, le- at least a little bit who's going to make it or who is kind of just full of themselves or has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So let's talk about the teams a little bit that you've seen, and maybe we'll have to like think through this together a little bit and work off each other to some extent. But like, how would you categorize the teams that you've seen? Like, what works well in your experience? What doesn't work as well? Are there certain like patterns that exist in terms of these kinds of teams with this formation tend to work well? These kind of teams with this formation don't work as well. What are your thoughts there? Also, like, where do you think we're at now currently as it pertains to teams? Like any thoughts you have around those questions?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I was trying to think on this question earlier, and what it kind of came down, it's a lot of it's feeling and vibe, at least with me. We don't really usually do too much digging into people's like backgrounds or work history, but you can quickly tell just by how they interact either in the group chat. We kind of do a lot of it via Discord DM or Telegram, and then in the call as well, whether it's like I think the biggest thing is just like, are you a good person? Are you a good person or are you trying? Like, and those two things, it's pretty easy to tell right off the bat just by like a lot of the times with these giveaways and allow lists, like there's a very specific process, where we'll try to get everyone's address just direct to contract. And oftentimes that's like the most efficient way by far. But there's a lot of people who, try to make you jump through hoops and join the Discord and do all this other stuff. And you can kind of tell like how they handle certain situations, or I've gotten a lot better at handling it as well, just how I kind of frame it. But there's people who will like get mad and try to, push it on you and your members, and you try to explain it to them nicely, but maybe they understand, maybe they don't. And it's kind of just a lot of the general like temperament of the groups, I think tells a lot um in the dynamic. At least that's what I kind of look forward. It's a very, what's the word? Not quantifiable, but that's been my best seed for success. If there's someone that I don't like or someone that's, trying to force the issue, usually that ends up biting them in the butt.
Yeah. So that's a really good and interesting insight, especially because you probably have a lot of data on that, right? A lot of experience. So I have like an interesting, maybe related question that exists, right? Let's just make the assumption that like two different projects or many different projects have similar Web3 experience, right? Web3 is still new, right? Everyone's learning. Obviously, that's not the case, and some people know more or less, etc. But let's assume they have similar. Do you think you'd take a team whose founders have very good intent, but they may not be as like functionally skilled from like a membership side or a product side or a game side if they're producing a game or whatever it is, but they have the hustle and the grit and the care? Or do you think you take somebody with not as good intent or not as quite communicative, maybe not rugged intent, but maybe not quite as good intent and vibe and all that stuff, but a lot of functional experience in their space? What have you seen that's worked better or worse? Is there any pattern there?
Oh, it's such a good question. I was like thinking about asking myself. It's like I would say the biggest differentiator would be like their degen experience, I guess, which like feels almost malintenty, I guess. But there's so many people who have such good intentions, but they're just like naive. So I think I'm correlating those two,
Yeah.
where maybe that's not always the case. Um, but I think that, you know, a lot of the times we aren't looking for the teams with bad intent, but just the nature of getting these NFT projects done, like the more you kind of see under the hood and see all the kind of sketchy stuff that goes on, you realize that like there needs to be a certain extent of, whether it's them botting their own Twitter, botting their Discord, things like that, that kind of gets the ball moving and gets more eyeballs on it, that some of these good intention projects might not do well enough. And, you can have the best project with the best intentions and it just won't work if people aren't looking at you or you're not making noise.
Yeah. That makes sense what you're saying. I think what I'm hearing you say too is right. It's kind of like this when you're saying the Jenny, for instance, the Jenny experience. It's more about like knowing how the game is played. It sounds like from a project creation standpoint, right? Such that it has hype, real, artificial, some combination of both, right? Anything to be able to drum it up and understanding that. It almost feels not unlike a company if you were to, in theory, have like shares or something in it, right? Like their job, of course, is to make sure that the investors in the company are getting returns, right? Like that's the whole point of it, right? Even if it's a so-so product. And I'm trying to think of a parallel from like real life. I'm just not thinking of like an example of something that's so-so, but that does an awesome job in terms of like delivering returns. But versus like somebody who maybe has a great intent and like has a great product and everything, but they do not know how to deliver investor returns whatsoever. Do I kind of have that right in terms of what you're saying? Like knowing the game.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. And yeah, exactly. Like just you just have to know what the game is so that you can play it, to your best ability. And if you're just naive and just trying to do something good for the out of the sake of your own heart, you might just not have the context to make it work, which is maybe a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
Okay, that makes total sense. So I'm like even jotting down notes in the background as I'm talking to you, and it sounds like the three themes that I'm hearing from you are one, this concept of knowing the game, right? Like knowing how the game is played so that traders or investors can get returns, right? And the good thing about that, us discussing it is that might even be like a solvable thing for somebody in here. Let's just say, for instance, like a project was already minted or you're considering minting it, right? Like one way to maybe do due diligence if you want to trade or invest in that project is try to connect with the founder of the project and test some of these assumptions on it, test the vibe, test how they respond to things, rather than just taking like a Discord and the activity in there is at like the only data point. So that's number one. Number two would be this kind of like ethics, decency, and care, right? Which is kind of like ensuring you're not getting rugged, that you're going to be treated appropriately, all that good stuff. And then I guess also this like subject matter expertise, so that way they can actually deliver on what they're saying too. So those are the three things that are really, really popping out to me. And hopefully, a good starting checklist maybe for people that are listening as well, beyond what you already know. So one other related point to this too, Jacob, that always comes up, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is what is your current perspective, right? July 2022, right? The development we've had a year and change. What's your current perspective on doxed versus undoxed founders at this point? Like, do you have do you have a position on that? Do you have an updated position on that? Like, what's your latest thoughts there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's changed so much. I feel like, I mean, as a degen, I would say that doxed is not always the best. Like, it's nice to have that layer of speculation and that like layer of hype that can just, oh my God, who's the founder? Is it Yuga? Like, it just all these ridiculous ideas and questions that can, make the price go crazy. As someone making these partnership deals and collabs for MVHQ, I think that being able to see that person on a video chat or however we're having our first meeting is always going to be my preference. And that's always going to, be where you can make the best connections and have the most candid conversations and get to the best outcome, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting what you're saying because it's almost like from, let's just say, the MVHQ perspective, to ensure that we have good quality projects. Seeing the person, of course, like the doxing is of use, right? It makes sure that they're solid and real person, and therefore not likely to have an issue. But it sounds like on the flip side of that is the undoxed from like an investor or trader standpoint sometimes could be a wild card to some extent, right? That maybe even presents more upside because you already know if somebody's doxed, you already know what you're getting there, right? And therefore it might be baked into the price of what it is. For instance, if somebody came from a very successful project, or if they came from a very solid Web2 company or background or whatever it is, right? Everyone kind of knows it at that point. But with the undoxed founder, maybe there's just more ambiguity and upside, possibly. Tough balance, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's just like Goblins was a good example, or I mean, any of these projects that either reveal or have some sort of deliverable. Like usually once it's delivered, there's no way it lives up to the hype, and then that's kind of when things start to go around.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. That's a good example too that you're giving. So, in line with examples, Scott Go put a question in here that I think is quite relevant. So, what are some of your favorite projects that you've been able to partner with for MBHQ members, maybe even otherwise too? And what stood out about those teams as well, in thinking about it? Any projects come to mind where you just feel like it was an excellent partnership, top to bottom? One or a couple of those projects.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first one and this one actually has been, a good partner long term. Maybe not the specific project forever, but was the other side. So when we, not to confuse them with the, Yuga Metaverse,
Yeah.
but they were kind of those 3D hype beastie PFPs forever ago.
Mhm.
And what really stood about the team there was just like we just vibed so well so quickly, and they were just clearly degens like before there were a lot of projects that were like founded by degens. And they just you could just tell that they had a better understanding of the market and of buying, minting, selling NFTs than the other projects, which just gave us like added confidence on them and just made us closer as friends. And then, their project minted out, it had a really good floor price and then a not really good floor price, but we've been able to like partner on other projects and introduce each other to other, important people that have helped us along the way. So that's been just a really good relationship, a really good friend. Another one that people probably know me for, liking at one point was Star Catchers. So that one, I think bit a lot of people in the butt. But what stood out to me originally was just how different they were approaching it, in terms of the like payout with the kind of vesting schedule. And that just really stood out to me. It made me think that they're taking a whole different approach. And yeah, I would say one thing that I learned from that was that like no matter how good you think the idea is or one of the teams, and this has been happened before where you have a really good feeling about the team, but maybe the timing in the market's bad or they mess one point up or just anything can go wrong. You can't get tied to the team. You can't get tied to your bags. You can't get tied to anything. And that's been a lesson that me and a lot of people have to learn the hard way. But it's once you've been through it, you're a lot better off for it.
Yeah. If I remember right, other side was the one that we had the partnership with that also had the MVHQ shirt in it, right? As an attribute.
Yes, that was the first MVHQ trait. So that was also just like a historic moment, and the fact that they were like willing to do that, and we kind of both took a risk on each other, and I think it worked out really well, and opened a lot of doors. That was a really cool moment too.
Yeah, that's extremely cool moment to actually see that embedded in a project itself, and then I think it became at least some. I feel like some at least some other project had that afterwards, right? That wasn't the only project with an MBHQ element. If I'm not
Oh
mistaken.
yeah, we've got like 10 to 15 projects now.
Yeah,
Mitch has a whole nice little lookbook on all of them, but yeah, it's crazy.
very very cool. Yeah, that's really cool to hear that story. So for those teams, just out of curiosity, for those teams specifically, for other side than Star Catchers, like who were you dealing with and having those discussions? Kind of what was the formation of that team, if you remember? Was it just a couple of co-founders that were just mixing and mingling in terms of skill sets? Was it a couple of specialists that you were dealing with? Like how was that set up?
Yeah, I would say I think the other side, there was like the two main founders that I was talking to, or we were talking to, which was like Taco Cat and then um the bearded wizard, or I can't remember his exact name, but it was like one was kind of like the marketing guy and the sales guy, which was Taco Cat, and then the other one was more on like the tech product management side. And I think that's kind of a really good um balance. You definitely need someone specifically for marketing on any team. I think that's the most important thing by far, because that's where get the hype, and that's where all the messaging comes across, and that's just such an important part. So I think the teams, just going back to your early question, the teams that have the least marketing experience are usually the ones that um, maybe they're really good at making a product, but it just doesn't matter.
Yeah,
And then for star catchers, um, yeah, I think like just dissecting it back, I think looking at the rules we kind of put in place today, there was a lot of red flags where maybe they were like super unresponsive after the first meeting. So I had like one really good meeting, and then I was just kind of clinging on to that from our first conversation. And there's a lot of red flags where they just weren't responding, or it was taking forever, or things maybe wouldn't make 100% sense. And so I think that knowing what I know now, obviously hindsight's 2020, but I might have been able to pick it up or not be as bullish as I was at the time.
yeah, that's an interesting point, and I feel like that one, even from like for anybody listening now or is going to listen in the future, right? Like that also, it seems like even if you're not the person who's dealing directly with these projects like you are, right? You're just an investor or trader. I mean, that's also something that seems like that can easily be tested, right? Which is, from an announcement standpoint from beyond, are they doing what they say they're going to do or are they not, right? It's kind of that simple. And that obviously builds trust. Of course, like nothing's ever perfect, right? We're in early Web 3 days, so we're not operating from like an unreasonable point where everything has to go 100% right always, which is of course not the case. But at least getting some sense of that and testing it and asking questions, I think, could be a really good approach for that too. So yeah, that's definitely very interesting to hear on your side and how those teams were kind of divided up, and also interesting hearing you say about star catchers in hindsight and seeing what that was like. So um, obviously you've also spent a good amount of time on the road as well, right? And you're going to conferences, you're going to places, meeting with partners, things like that. And you obviously there's no bias that exists either, right? Like for MVHQ purposes, just trying to find the best partners that make sense for from a project standpoint, growth standpoint, all those good things. Are you seeing any trends in terms of that beyond, maybe some of the obvious, which is, New York, maybe Bay Area, possibly Los Angeles, has a little bit of extra skewing? Are you seeing any other trends in terms of, where certain an unusual number of projects are cropping up, where there's certain technology cropping up, different styles, like anything come to mind?
Yeah, yeah. I think I would say, the biggest concentrations, at least in the US, are New York and then LA. I think LA is, just the hub for all these like influencers and social media and, Hollywood, where that's kind of becoming a bigger deal in Web3, whether it's, influencers, I guess, don't have as much power as they used to. The space has grown a little bit and people have just become, scorned by that, I think. But it's still such a massive part of it that I think it's just natural for people to kind of flock there and for the Web2 influencers and KOLs to transition into Web3. And then New York, it's New York. It's just the most degen city in the US. Um, I think from going to these like different conferences, it's interesting to see where everyone else is from. So I think there's a lot of people out of the country that are coming to the US. I think that's probably a big trend. And we're seeing a lot of, people who might have been sitting on the sidelines or might have like a traditional crypto background that are, dipping their toes into NFTs or looking for that kind of, um, what's the word? Looking for like that authority in the space to kind of guide them. And that's where, we're positioned so well as a community to lead those people and to do a lot of really, really cool um, activations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying, and I think a good point that you're bringing up too that I guess I'd only partly thought of before, right? If you look at so I live in Los Angeles now. I'm from New York originally. I live in Los Angeles now, and Los Angeles is one of the bigger cities in the U.S., but it's not where you like explicitly want to call out explicitly call out as to why there's a decent amount of projects that exist there, right? But I think it's as thinking about it, like what are the core functional skills that are needed to be able to release a good NFT project, right? And it's some element of entertainment, some element of marketing, which is the influencer piece that you said, also a pretty material element in design as well, which is a big thing here too. In terms of designing assets, designing brands, designing products or like NFTs in this case. So it kind of makes sense, as we're thinking of it. And in New York, of course, degen like you suggested, but also heavy on the business side too. Then as we look at like our crowd in here, right, and people that we've met in MVHQ who are in the U.S. at least, like we have a decent group of people in Los Angeles. Also, maybe the biggest group of people in Los Angeles. Pretty good group of people in New York as well. But then it's like pretty distributed afterwards, right? So it's interesting to see that like that's in theory the case, but of course we know like anybody in here with the experience they have is like thoroughly capable of thinking through and putting together a very solid NFT project as well, right? I mean, with the experience compared to anybody outside of here or certainly outside of Web3 at this point. So it's an interesting thing to see what's happening with the teams that you're seeing. And I don't know if you know the answer to this, but we'll try at the very least. With the teams that you're seeing, both with projects you've met and what your teams you're seeing now, are those teams, at least the core part of the team, they tend to be distributed in your experience? Do they tend to all be in the same geographic location, distributed across the US? Certainly some distributed internationally too. Like what trends are you seeing there?
Yeah, I would say most of the teams, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's like 50-50. But I would say a lot of them are like in the same place or grew up together or have some sort of previous connection. And I'm thinking about it too now. It's interesting I have the experience on, mostly on the collab side, on the, MBHQ side, but I also, if we want to talk about it, had another certain project that never really minted, that gave me insights into what it's like as, driving the project as more of a on the founding team and doing the marketing and things like that, which was a very, very interesting experience.
Yeah, yeah, that makes complete sense. And I mean, if we even look pre-Web3, right? Like for the past 5, 10 years, distributed workforces, distributed contractors, right, was already a thing, right, with tons of freelancing sites and things that existed. So like the foundation was already there to be able to bring people across. But even in like Web2 startup land, the oftentimes like the more successful teams that existed were ones that knew each other and had that bond and relationship ready to begin with, right? Versus pieces coming together, which is also doable. Don't get me wrong; like it's totally doable as well. But having any kind of connection before starting the latest project, I feel like is also a very good indicator of success versus not having any background, even months, let's say, or a year of background, and just like random pieces coming together on a contractory basis, right? Where there's not that trust, there's not that like working relationship, there's not the incentive structure, etc. And seems like a pretty good indicator, also, as you're saying that. Um, Jacob, where do you think that's all going as a result? So right now we're in this like build mode time frame, right? Where obviously like the margins on trading are not what they were 6 months ago or prior. So we're in some trade mode, but a lot of build mode right now, right? Therefore, like the incentives aren't you could just churn out 100 projects and they're all going to mint out and it's wild and everything else. It's like where do you think teams are going to become more of what you said, which is groups of people who have existing relationships and trust and they're building with like a mid or longer time horizon? Do you think there still will be plenty of these kind of like random teams that get cobbled together? Do you think it's a product of a hot market? And so as soon as there's a hot market again, all bets are off and we're going to get back to like full degen mode. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I definitely hope so. I hope that most projects are people who have those existing connections and relationships and want to work together. They want to work together, they want to build something, and that's what we're seeing now is a lot of more of those like passion projects where, people are kind of planning these things out in advance, and yeah, like you said, it's less cash grabby, even though there's still definitely elements of that. But I think that, yeah, once the market heats back up, you're always going to have people that are trying to jump on that and, profit off of it. So I think that it's gonna, like you kind of mentioned, go in ebbs and flows. But right now, it's my favorite time because I I know I'm not the best trader. I don't have the stomach for it. I don't have, uh, that sort of 100% analytical mind, or I guess that's not even the best thing for NFTs, but this is a much more sustainable lifestyle for me. This is much more like uh empowering and exciting. I think getting to build. So being able to do that when it's not as crazy is a lot more comfortable, or you can just focus a lot more and you don't have to you can kind of block out the noise.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with what you're saying. I mean, it's hard when the markets are going nuts. You want to build something also, but there's new mints that are constantly flying that you can go for 5, 10x, and flip other things in constant upward. So I totally understand what you're saying there. I'm sure everybody understands what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's a crazy FOMO, right? You're FOMOing on just thousands of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. It makes complete sense. So, one other thing that I thought would be really useful for everyone to talk about in here, right, is right now we have a bunch of different folks in here, of course, right? But many of the folks in here, of course, have been trading for a good amount of time and are maybe considering, joining a team, building a project, something like that, right? And so, especially at this current time. So, one of the things that you did, as you said, is you were kind of in this in between period, and Web3 kind of came calling, and you were very interested, and the question was just kind of where and going for it, right? And I think in the case of MVHQ, that's a good example of where you did just kind of see the opportunity and you went for it. And so, what was your mindset there, right? I want to point this at like anybody who's interested in joining a project but maybe doesn't know where to join the which project to join or how to start or whatever else. What was your mindset? Like, how did you go about it, if you remember, just going after and attacking and going for the opportunity at the time, and maybe not knowing all the answers either, right? Like, you probably didn't know exactly what was going to happen if you went for the went to join the team in this case, exactly what the next steps were. Like, what was your mindset there, if you remember?
Oh yeah, so many things to speak about there. I would say with MVHQ, or kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, where I was trying to find that more traditional job in Web3 and not like fully diving in because it's scary. I think that's the biggest thing. Like it's scary to, um, you know, go from a stable job making, just a modest salary and doing your, 9 to 5. It's more of like a clear path, right? Where diving into Web3, it's really what you make of it, which is what my favorite part is. But making that first initial big leap and really believing in yourself and diving in, I would say that's the most important part, but also the hardest part. And you just have to know yourself, and what you're willing to put in, and if it's something that you really are passionate and care about, I think it'll certainly work out. But if you have any hesitations, you just gotta think long and hard about it. And I think the best way for anyone who is, I guess, going back and forth with these things and having doubts, is to just kind of try to slowly dip your feet in. I think the hardest part with these NFT projects is that you're tied to these projects for the rest of your life. Like that's how these NFT people make you feel, where, you can't let the project rug, you got to keep the floor price up. You got to keep doing new things. You got to do all this stuff. And it's like a tremendous amount of pressure. Um, with MVHQ, like there's so many other things we have going for us and such an incredible community that it's like there's so many different ways to provide value. But for like these NFT projects that you're just tied down to such a like narrow view for the most part, that it's just very demanding for a very long time. So I would say like before maybe jumping into um a project that you're all in on, start just trying to take baby steps where, you manage the Twitter or you manage the Discord for a project, or you just kind of see what it's like working with a team and what those team meetings are, and you can kind of feel it out, before maybe starting your own project, because it's really easy to get in way over your head, um, and yeah, just end up not working out. But I think going back to the project that I worked on, that didn't work out. I think it was the best thing ever that it didn't work out, because it solidified my confidence in what I'm doing now, as well as just didn't tie me down to having that constant mental strain in the back of my head. Like, what am I doing for that project? How am I going to keep the floor price up? And a lot of these things are things that are out of your control no matter what you are doing.
Yeah, those are excellent points, and I think one thing you were hitting on there at the end too is this, like, for all right, all startups, not just Web3 stuff, but all startups, right? Like and all businesses, frankly, right? Like the concept of imposter syndrome is something that always comes up, right? Of am I doing a perfect job here? How come this metric that I care about is not adjusting? And like you said, recognizing what's in your control and not, but like we're still all new here, right? So like figuring out what you're good at, what you enjoy at, where you can put time and energy and effort and all that good stuff, knowing that nobody probably has a perfect answer to it, right? And it's ambiguity. And then also applying what you said, Jacob, in terms of just running the test in the beginning, getting a feel for like how the team works, how you work together, all those good kinds of things. And I think your example is a great one. I mean, I think Jarvis did a good example of that too, right? Where he took on a specific project. I don't know if there was something before that, but took a specific project with the team, saw how it worked. It seemed like it worked out, and then he's kind of off to the races at that point, right? So those are really great tips that you really pointed out. Building on top of that, as we move forward in NFT land and continue to build in this climate and maybe trade a little bit, where do you think the hottest areas are going to be? So if somebody said to you, Jacob, like, where do you think where should I consider pointing my attention? I know I want to be in, an NFT somewhere. I think I want to join a team, where would you suggest that they spend their time? Like, where do you think is heading towards or going to be super hot? Where are the best bets in your opinion? Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first and foremost, like you just got to do what interests you, what you're passionate about, what makes you happy, because that's ultimately what's gonna keep you motivated and keep you performing more than a paycheck, more than someone really cool on the team, more than, XYZ, is going to be like that intrinsic motivation to just do something you like. I think that's the most important thing. I think for me, or just in terms of things that like I'm interested in and excited to work on, would definitely be like all these NFT tools and platforms and marketplaces, which is kind of where we've steered a lot of our like partnerships and investments at MVHQ, just because I mean, we're all some of the most, well-versed, experienced traders in NFTs. Just being here for, over a year at this point, no one can take that away from you guys. And I think that that's where, we have a clear edge. And yeah, so I would say that's like where I would just empower people to realize what they know, and that most people in the space, most people in the world do not have that same knowledge, or not the extent that we do. So I think that that's where I would definitely focus, more so than like a PFP project, maybe. But that's more from an expertise and like sustainability, long term perspective, I would say.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I am curious to hear about your perspective, if you have any perspective lately. Obviously, like a handful of marketplaces and other kind of tools have had a little bit of trouble lately. So, where do we think we're headed marketplace wise? Coinbase, GMI, not NGMI. What do you think is going to happen?
I think they're all NGMI, except for the aggregators. And then out of the aggregators, we've got like three main ones right now, right? So you had Gem, which was kind of the king for a bit in terms of it just worked and it was great. And then OpenSea bought it and now it sucks. So they're kind of out of the mix now, at least in my eyes. Genie never really worked the way you wanted it to. It was like just cool and novel because it was kind of the first to do it, but they moved super slow, never really improved the way they could. I think Gem actually split off from Genie's team, so maybe that's why it never really kind of got to that space. And then we now have Blur, which has been pretty eye-opening working with them, just because you can see how focused they are on the product. And I think us going through like seeing what happened with Looks Rare, where they had great tokenomics, they had a great Ponzi-nomics, whatever you want to call it, but when it came down to just using the platform and all the different features being there, it wasn't quite up to um, the best standards, and that's kind of where I think it is why it's fallen off and why it never really caught the traction that it could have. And I think that for user retention, just having a good platform that works incredibly well is the most important thing now, seeing that play out. And that's what you see with NFT nerds, where the tool is just so valuable because it works very well and has all the features you want and has a nice UI and UX. And that's what has kept us on that platform. And I think that um, Blur might be that next aggregator to hopefully do that. And with the feedback from you wonderful degens that we're giving them constantly through our partnership, I think we're moving them in the right direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and a good layout of kind of how things have evolved, and a good refresh for me definitely too. So, I mean, I think the interesting thing that you're bringing up now that's on my mind too is like what platform, right? What platform is going to be able to bridge the two main segments that exist, right? Because there's like the us's of the world that exist, and I'm not even going to put myself in there, but I'll try. The us's of the world, right, who want to trade and flip multiple at a time or list multiple at a time or other features, of course, things like that. And then there's the kind of the newbies that exist as well, right? Who need some kind of clean on ramp and want to see NFTs and want to trade, and we want them, of course, in as well. So having, of course, like having a disjointed approach to that, right, where they're using Coinbase and we're using, whatever it is, right, Blur or whatever it is, like that's not going to work very effectively. So this like aggregation approach is going to be needed, right, if we want to have everyone participating in the same market. So I'm just very curious to see how exactly that goes and how that pans out. Um, so one other final question, maybe on my mind, and if anybody does have questions, now is a perfect time to drop them in to guest questions because just have one more question with Jacob, and then we'll do those if any. So I'm just curious, Jacob, at this point, right, of July of 22, a year and change in, what are you personally most excited about in terms of Web3? And that could be a specific project, specific category of project. It could be, where certain things are heading. Anything come to mind? Like what's really exciting you the most as you wake up every day dealing with Web3?
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts there, but one thing I wanted to touch on before we get into that was maybe a more specific insight into like what makes a good team, and something that I've noticed as you were kind of uncovering these answers was that like their ability to take feedback and for us to give them, you know, constructive criticism or just criticism in general. I think that's a super, super important indicator into the team that kind of goes back into the, the vibe check and just being a friendly person, but more a concrete example. I think that's a huge indicator. If they're very rigid and think that they know everything and aren't open to it at all, that's a really bad sign, a really big red flag in my eyes. And if they're, receptive to it or grateful for it, or, they see a new perspective because of it, that's way more bullish and can say a lot about the team.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm happy you called that out. And it sounds like what you're kind of saying in there is, of course, there's going to be some teams that are more experienced, less experienced, everything in between. But you know, this team, MBHQ, and otherwise, of course, has a ton of experience. Is bringing things up because they care, right? And there's a perspective that exists. So at the very least, like taking in that feedback, maybe not agreeing with it, maybe not doing it, maybe even having a reason why they didn't want to do it, right? But at least like absorbing the feedback and responding to it and being appreciative and that kind of a thing.
Exactly. Just how they handle it, even if they might have a better answer, or, um, for one reason or another, they did whatever the hypothetical situation is, but just being able to, internalize that and handle it in a professional manner is a lot different than, just shrugging it off or, thinking that they're better.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That makes complete sense. Complete sense. So, with with that in mind, then are you starting to see more of that? I guess is the question. Are you starting to see more teams more receptive, more cognizant of the market? Like, what yeah, is that exciting you? Is like the progress of teams that you're seeing lately exciting you? What in general are you excited about? Are you seeing good signs on as this market evolves at this point? What's coming to mind?
Yeah, I mean, the more people you meet, the more NGMI people you meet. But I think that from a macro perspective, like looking back, not focusing specifically on our collabs or like our allow list partnerships, and focusing more on some of our bigger like corporate partnerships. I think that's what I'm really excited about. There's a lot of really cool people that I would have never had the chance to meet or work with, without NFTs or without NBHQ. And I think, through our reputation, through everything that you guys have done on the blockchain, um, as well as just the team that we've been able to um, form here has set us up in a really good position to onboard a lot of these big Web2 companies and big players from different industries that and that's kind of what I'm most excited for, being able to put our fingerprints and guide those relationships is super exciting, super motivating. And yeah, you're seeing people with more experience come into the space. I would say, like, going back to your old question about just, what am I most excited about? It's MVHQ. Like, it's always been MVHQ, and that's what, made me take this leap and, stalk Mitch and get him to give me a chance. So I think that it sounds super uh cheesy, but that I just see so much potential in everyone here, and this is what gave me my start in NFTs, gave me the confidence to quit my job, because I knew I had um 13 1400 other people trading NFTs full time, and if I can't be the only crazy one. So I think that, yeah, I'm just super excited for, if you've been lucky enough to attend one of the in-person meetups, like, just how crazy the energy is and how amazing everyone is. Like, that's the biggest thing, is just like, we've never had um the tools and technology to bring this amount of like-minded, intelligent, kind people together. And we're kind of the start of that, and one of the best examples, I think. So just being able to continue to build on that and give value back to everybody, and just hopefully, have a good time together and make some money on the side.
Yeah.
That's what I'm most excited for.
Yeah, I mean, the meetups, as you said, are so much fun every single time. I mean, like the look on people's faces as you, like, oh, discover who a person is and
Yeah.
talk about something you did. I mean, just awesome, awesome time. It's hard to replicate, I feel like, even in other groups. So, just one last question that seemed to come up from Scott Co, which is, with the amount of experience on the team, would MBHQ consider doing any project curation directly in the future for members, similar to an art blocks or what Proof is doing with Grails? Any thought there? I mean, maybe we may be teetering into alpha space here, but any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think, like, a great example of something that's kind of, I guess, along those lines or on the incubation side of things is like degen, for example. We have Ral making a cracked out project. It's absolutely incredible, and I think we all use it pretty much daily at this point. But um yeah, he kind of came to a few people to get feedback initially. I think, Mitch was one of them, a couple other people on the staff, and just kind of slowly got those balls rolling. He's very meticulous about how he did it, but how we've been able to partner now that he's, like, ready to show the world and doing the release and getting feedback and stuff from there, it's a very natural progression. So I think we're definitely looking to do more of that, especially with, the members that we have and we know and trust and have that experience. Um, I think, it's kind of what we talked about earlier in terms of how I would recommend starting a project and things like that. So I think that, um, yeah, we're looking to kind of formalize that more, and definitely always open to um, hearing what members are doing and how we can help.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really good segue that you made too, right? And that's for anybody who's listening right now, right? That we have that open dialogue that does exist in here, right? And so therefore that opportunity does exist, right? We do have a group of people who are in the space, so just good reiteration of that, Jacob. Man, that's really great. So, um, with that said, I think this has been a fantastic, fantastic session, man. Appreciate you just being so open about what your background was like, kind of how you were feeling at the time when you entered the space and how it's evolved and all those good things. Just really, really helpful, really thoughtful, man. Just absolutely excellent. So thank you so much for coming on. Everybody listening now, of course, thank you for joining. Thank you for your questions as well. Just a reminder that you will see the form floating around. And so if for you or for somebody else, you have somebody who you think would just be perfect, this is an MBHU podcast at the end of the day that is expanding to other channels. So we're just looking for, the best people and the best, who we think would make the best product that everyone wants to hear. So please, feel free to fill out the form. Let us know if you have any thoughts. That always is a help. And thank you everyone for joining today. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll do same time next week, everyone. Thanks so much, and see everybody in VC1.